Yes, my name is Cameron Berglund. I'm a lecturer here at the College of Environment Design. I'm going to be talking about my connections to East Africa and then some of the work I've gotten to do there recently, and then kind of drawing some conclusions out of that. Main takeaways: if you're going to take any notes to prove you were here, just write these things down and you can pretend you were here the whole time, right? I'll talk about my background, and then I'm going to talk about the process completion and the reflections, impacts that we had on the OCAT children's projects we've been doing. And then hopefully, maybe I'll inspire and challenge you to step out of your normal trajectory and maybe go abroad. Background, I am from the northern suburbs of Atlanta, from Georgia. It's really not that exciting. Came to school here, like Brad said, moved to Denver, ended up moving to Uganda, which we'll get into, back to Atlanta, and then Athens. There's a bunch of adjectives over there to describe me. There's my amazing family, right there. Shout out to Molly Berglund. Come on, that's right there. I've gotten to work for like 20 years. I've done a ton of different types of work, broad professional experience, all kinds of stuff. Strong emphasis on thematic and educational environments. So like some Disney, Universal Studios work, like some big resort stuff. And then my favorite project, of course, the Children's Garden at the State Botanic Gardens, which I was able to complete with working for Kuhn's Environmental Design. I still get to practice on the side because I love what we get to do, and I love bringing that experience into the classroom, and then also bringing students into some of my work as well. So there's a little bit of background on some of the work I've done, and then I'll talk about how I connected to East Africa. In 2010, when I lived in Denver, I was really excited about my profession. I loved it, but I was also wondering if I could find a more service-oriented trajectory. Felt like maybe I should look for that, and so I saved some money. My wife saved more money because she makes more money than me, of course. And we quit our jobs and started traveling. Ended up meeting with a lot of different ministries and a lot of different organizations as we traveled around. We were actually couch surfing. If anyone's ever done couch surfing, I don't know if I could recommend that in this talk, but in Uganda, and ended up being led to or found this small vocational school for landscape and gardening in the middle of Kampala. So they were actually looking for someone to help teach landscape design. I happened to be a landscape architect, so I helped them, the faculty there, and I helped the Ministry of Education to develop a landscape design curriculum for post-high school Ugandans and East Africans. This was in like 2010 to 2012. And my students soaked it up. It was such a rich experience, very challenging place to live. Uganda and a lot of East Africa is considered the developing world or the majority world, or sometimes the third world. The majority world is a common term used nowadays because a majority of the world lives in like the amount of poverty or material amounts that they have, right? So the school had a really strong impact. I was able to kind of keep in touch with them, and I was able to mentor some of the students who are now actually teaching at the school. And through continued relationships, I was able to go back in 2023, fast forward about 10 years. And Trimble SketchUp was actually able to send me over there. I did a SketchUp and sketching workshop, both in Uganda and in Nairobi at Jomo Kenyatta University. Jomo Kenyatta University is the largest landscape architecture program on the continent of Africa. So it was super rad to get to go there and actually teach with them. And all of this kind of set me up to be in the region when Dr. Lioba Moshi, who started the Africa Studies Institute 30 years ago, 20 years ago? Yeah, one of those. Okay, so you can ask her. You should talk to her afterwards. But she asked me to come and join the existing Maymester, which she is teaching in Tanzania and has been doing so for a long time. I was across the pond in Uganda going to Kenya, so I took a flight down to Tanzania and got to scout out the location, and I got to see that I would love to teach a Maymester over there. So that brings us to, that kind of connects me to East Africa and then to the Maymester program, and then we're going to unpack the OCAT Children's Home, the design and the design build projects that I've been doing the past 2 years there. So the One Kid at a Time Children's Home, or OCAT as I'll call it, is a children's home just outside of Moshi, Tanzania, which is in northern Tanzania. It was started by Dr. Moshe and actually a former Maymester student, right? Wasn't it Todd? It was Todd that did it, right? Yeah, we'll talk about him in a little bit. So 18 acres for the full site, and you can see there's already an existing compound there. They have about 25 kids that live there currently, and they do not have families, so this is their home. It's also incredibly beautiful. This is of Kilimanjaro. Has anyone heard of Kilimanjaro? Show of hands. Yes. Okay. Just put it up anyway because it's pretty famous, right? So it's a beautiful location. This is the central courtyard. It was all concrete when we arrived in 2024. This is like the dorms and the dining area. This is the actual main facility on site right now. Okay. So with the students in this first studio when we went in 2024, we sat down with Dr. Moshe and the Catholic sisters that help run the home, and we put pens in their hand and we asked them like what's working, what's not. The cool thing, if you're not a landscape architect student, I'll talk about what a master plan is, because the goal was to kind of help master plan this 18 acres and to kind of envision in the future what could be at this home, right? So once we had feedback, we were able to go to the site and do some inventory and understand it. The students sat down and started sketching out ideas and trying to think down the road, what could this look like? That's one of the most powerful things that we as landscape architects do, is envision the future for other people, right? So we actually take what they're thinking about and we put that on paper and we help that become a reality. So they also started looking at, how else could we incorporate some, fun learning elements into the campus for the kiddos, A, because it's fun, and B, because it's really good for kids, right? So there's the crew from 2024. That's 3 landscape architect students and 2 civil engineers, right? Yeah, which by the way, they're actually going back to grad school for landscape architecture. Nailed it. Brad, you gonna write that down? Did you write that down? They're applying, maybe, I don't know. Okay, but so we got input from Leoba and the sisters, but then we had to bring in the experts, right? We had to hang out with these kids. We had to play helicopter. Has anybody played helicopter? Come on, it's phenomenal. Yeah. So, but we actually we wanted to do what's known as a participatory workshop, right? We wanted to get these kids involved. We wanted to actually try to empower them by giving them a say in their environment, right? I'll mention this again, but people in institutional care, especially kids in institutional care and people in material poverty, one of the hardest things, if you read about it, is the lack of agency or choice, right? So giving kids an actual choice in their environment and having them hopefully be empowered by that was some of the goal. Now, I mentioned working on the State Botanic Garden, and I got to design a workshop there for kids, and it was, I thought it was amazing. It was amazing. But this is, of course, a slightly different context, right? So I pulled some of what I had learned from this one. We actually had them vote on preferences. So it was a very similar setup that you'll see that we actually did in Tanzania. But because it's a very different context, I also had to do some research and find other people that were hopefully doing similar things, right? So, but when you start to look at the majority world and finding people doing participatory workshops with kids, the list gets really thin, right? There's not a lot of money in it, and it's kind of hard to do. But there's some really cool people doing really cool work. So Todd Ferry at the Center for Public Interest in Design, so he actually helped start OCAT back with Dr. Moshe years ago, right? So he's doing a ton of public interest design, participatory workshops. And I got to connect with my hero, Daniel Winterbottom, who when I was an undergrad came and talked about doing design build projects. And I've somewhat aspired to do that thing until I was actually able to do it this past summer. So I got to connect with him, hear his lessons learned, read his book. And then Arthur Adea, who started KDI, I met him when I taught at Jomo Kenyatta University. He does a lot of really cool participatory design in the slums of Nairobi. But then one of the ones that I found most helpful was actually this one called The City at Eye Level. It's by an urban design group out of Amsterdam. And it's all these just case studies on doing urban design and planning across like a lot of like majority world settings. And it's really cool stuff. So I was able to kind of pull from them and try to tailor this workshop to actually function in this environment. All right, so we have 3 parts in the workshop. We had draw your dreams, right? So we actually had, a bunch of paper and markers, and we were just like, if you had an infinite amount of money, what would you do for a garden? What do you think they said? Anybody?
Swimming pool.
Bingo. Number 1 thing. Actually, that was number 2. What was number 1? Anybody? Come on, throw something out there. Oh, you already know. You were there.
Soccer.
Yes, but the real word is football, Brad. Right? We all know America does many things well, but it doesn't get football right. Or at least they don't call it the right word, yeah. So one thing we learned out of this workshop is like these kids, they had very little exposure to like built environments, But they definitely knew that they wanted to play football, right? Like it came out like crazy. I mean, we almost ran out of green markers, So that was cool. What I'm gonna run through the whole workshop, and then I'll kind of do conclusions at the end of it for what we learned from it. But yep. So then the next one was our visual preference survey, right? So similar to what I did at the children's garden, but what we did, we had a station over here, and the students who came pulled together a series of possibly buildable learning landscape ideas, right? So 2 of the parameters that we were using for this, we wanted to possibly be able to build it in a design build setting, right? That was so we didn't want it to be too extravagant, but then also we wanted it to really to activate and to encourage physical play, which is really paramount for the development of healthy kids and healthy kids' brains, right? So kiddos who don't have access to play, like it's very hard on them. So. And also, I mentioned, it's something that we could possibly build. I don't know if we can build that, but we try to keep it within, like the possible realm. So here's kind of like the results of these. I'm going to do a deep dive in this at the end of the workshop thing. But, it was really cool to actually get them to say which ones they liked, but that's super subjective. Do they just like the colors of it, right? So then the most interesting thing about it was like, why do you like it? What about it? And there were certain things, you can kind of see some of the things that started to show up, like likes to climb or allows you to hide and stuff like that. So that was the second station, right? And then the third one was pure pandemonium. This was sculpt with kinetic sand, right? So a lot of times if you do participatory workshops with kids, and I know that some of you guys are doing these in Gainesville soon, a lot of times, like Todd Ferry was like, man, just get a ton of cardboard boxes and throw them out and just see what happens and just watch and see what the kids do. But I couldn't carry cardboard boxes up there. You don't really have that much cardboard, you didn't have things. So I was like, oh, we'll miniaturize it and we'll give them like little human figures and we'll see what they build and maybe we'll learn from it. And it was just basically pure pandemonium. The kids loved it. And they were like making these people jump around and we learned very little but had a great time, So... But yes, so key takeaways from the workshop, right? The kiddos had very little exposure to like built stuff, like having preferences on things you don't know about. It's pretty hard to do, right? But then they also had a huge interest in football, and so we really wanted to make sure we can incorporate that into the master plan and into the site. Also, here's kind of the winners, the 2 winners right here that got the most votes. And some of why they liked the votes was color, right? But also places to hide and climb, or hiding and climbing was a theme that we heard, right? So you're going to see how we try to incorporate that in the actual building. We also tried to sneak that into the design so it wouldn't be too much of a playground because they don't have that much supervision and you got to be safe as well, right? Okay, so here's the final master plan. You can see the big soccer field over there, number 7. This is what the students actually drafted in country, labeled it, got to run it by Dr. Moshe and the whole administration to kind of give them a vision for where they could go with the site, right? The students also really focused on the courtyard, right? Phase 1, if we're going to implement any of this, it's like phase 1 is going to be the courtyard. Let's start with the courtyard, and what could that be? And so you'll see there was this stage area. They do a lot of choreographed dancing, and then they also do, having things to kind of jump, climb, maybe even a little bit of lawn. even though the kids are not allowed to play soccer in the courtyard because they keep breaking windows, right? So it was clarified over and over again that this was not a soccer field, even though in the illustration I used for fundraising, there is a kid kicking a ball, right? I had to kind of sneak that in, right? So let me go back. What did I talk? Yep. So focus was that. So I took kind of what the students had designed, and then my TA last year helped me model it, and I drew this illustration so we could actually do fundraising, right? And then shout out to Bob Chipman. Come on, Bob, who actually helped fund this whole thing. And then we had to do more funding, which we'll get to later. But that was a big part of it, actually kind of pulling this together and seeing who wanted to be a part of the vision. So we were getting funding. And then we had this sketch, right? But if we were actually going to try to build it, we had to figure out how to build it. Now, thankfully, I was also teaching applied landscape construction last spring, right? So I made those students learn how to build decks, right? And they learned not only how to build decks, they took this sketch and I said, hey, even though like it's super fun to be the first person to design it, there's a ton of design from sketch to actual implementation. So my students had to design in 3D. They had to build these really detailed SketchUp models. I had to model actually the fasteners because nobody knows where a bolt goes until you actually have to model it or you actually have to build it, right? Yeah. So Service Learning gave us some grants, and then the Thomas Street Studio, shout out to those guys, the sculpture studio down the way, let us actually come in and partner with them and use their wood shop, right? So we were actually able to build these things, which gave my students awesome firsthand, like actually building, right? It's a lot easier to design things. To actually build something, you actually have to know how it works, right? It also allowed me to kind of have insight on the constructability of what we could possibly build, right? And then it also, allowed me to kind of understand the limitations of kiddos who had never, or students, no offense, who had never held a saw, right? So. And there it is. And then we got, in Critique Week, we all got to go stand on it. Doesn't it look like a giant choir picture? Isn't that nice? Yeah. So then from there, right, we had to try to get this thing built. Thankfully, we actually had a guy who was kind of in charge of building projects at the children's home, Anthony. And so he was able to find a contractor, right? And he's like, this contractor can read plans. And I was like, game on. Right? So, but then I had to take all those ideas that the students had designed, and myself and my TA, shout out to my TA, Bulo Atife, last semester, had to pull that into the most extensive CAD and SketchUp model you've ever seen, right? See all those individual bolts, right? I literally was trying to model exactly how we're going to put this thing together, because having somebody build something off of your drawings in America or in a developed world setting is borderline miraculous. But when you're trying to do it in Tanzania, all the way, across continents, across cultures, it gets even harder, right? So I wanted to make this thing really, really, really clear. And it also gave them pricing and quantities and everything. And also, it allowed us to have a tool to speak, literally to go back and forth with the drawing with our contractor on site. I'll talk a little bit more about why we have a contractor and the importance of that in a minute too. So, and then here's the crew for 2025. These people signed up to spend a whole month in May traveling around and building things and sleeping at a children's home, because I said, if you're coming with us, we're gonna do a deep dive. I want us to not just go and pass through. I want us to go and stay with these kids, because there's very valuable things in my experience in the majority world of being around people from very different backgrounds, especially people dealing with extreme poverty. Okay, so for some reason they signed up and we actually got to stay at the children's home. We had 3.5 weeks in country, maybe 4 weeks, and we had about 8 total days at OCAT to build it, right? And you're like, how did we do it? Well, we did it by finding an amazing contractor and having students who were gung-ho and dialed in to actually build it, right? And we'll talk about some of the challenges of it. It was super challenging. You can't tell because this isn't a video, but we barely had enough power to actually cut with our saw, right? If you think about it, nobody knows this. Maybe some of you know this, but they use 220 and we use don't we use 120 here, yeah, voltage-wise? So I had to borrow box to change the voltage. And then it still barely worked. We had to use hand saws like crazy, and then but that was kind of cool. It was also kind of the point of this whole thing was like this cross-cultural like exposure, cross-cultural learning. And so like Stonard is the name of our contractor, and he would come over and be like, "This is how you cut by hand," and his guys were experts. I mean, just slaying cuts. It was really cool. Yeah, so it also helped our team. You can watch. So this is how fast they work too. Isn't that amazing? That's why you hire a good contractor, because the speed is phenomenal. Look at that. So it helped my team. When I talked to Daniel Winterbottom, I'm like, dude, how do you go into these places and build things? And he's like, we have the correct expectations. We hire a local contractor because in the majority world, we don't need to be coming in and taking work away from people. We need to go in and support local business. We need to support craftsmen, and we need to honor them and actually learn with them, which was super cool. And this contractor, I've worked, because I lived in East Africa, I've worked with, it's sometimes hard to find people, it's hard to find people here who can actually build something well. This guy was very good. He was expensive, but very good. And very willing to work with us too, which was super cool. Because that was the other thing too, is like we were able to sit down, and so his English wasn't great, and my Swahili was even worse. So we could at least point at the plans and talk through things. And I'd go and set boards out, and he would measure things, and we would just try to figure it out right there. My students are involved in the whole thing, right? So the other thing, local plant knowledge, right? The cool thing, one of the neatest things that I really wanted my students to see from East Africa was all these roadside nurseries. So in any urban center in East Africa, you'll drive outside the city, there's all these plots that are maybe 100 feet wide to maybe even a quarter acre, and they're just full with all these propagated plants, right? In Uganda, they used to use old, they would sell bagged milk, right? So you cut the top off the 1 liter bagged milk, and then you have a propagation pot right there. But anyway, so these things are a treasure trove of like local knowledge. This guy was so dialed in. I have no idea how we got to connect with this person, but because a lot of guys, they're just propagating there. They don't know their botanic names or anything. But this guy knew so many botanic names. And then I started saying botanic names, and he was like, no way. And we were like, yeah, it was amazing. So he was super helpful. And so all of my students, they had to go through. I was like, hey, right when you get in country, you get out the little plant ID app. You start picking up. I had them all choose. I think I had 10 to 12 plants they had to learn. Then we started traveling, and they were actually learning the characteristics of these plants, what they cost, and how to actually get them to site. These poor kids are having to work. That's the Serengeti out the window right there. You see that? You can't, if we could zoom in, you'd see lions. Seriously. But if you do come on this May semester, which I highly recommend, it's a lot of work, right? Our major isn't that difficult. It just takes a lot of time, right? But they had to ID, they had to budget, and then they actually had to go and pick out these plants and load them up. And then we actually had to take them over to OCAT, where the deck was completed, right? And the planter boxes had been dug. And then this is the speed in which we actually installed. That joke's not nearly as funny the second time, but right. Look at this, right? And look how fast that grass came up. Wasn't that amazing? Did you guys see that? Okay. So other students from the May semester really want to get in on the install. So we had all these great volunteers come out. And you'll notice we actually have synthetic turf. Initially, we had talked about maybe ripping out some of the concrete and planting it in there. But the synthetic turf, which we are actually able to find in Moshi, which is miraculous by itself, no maintenance. It doesn't hide snakes, which is one of the parameters. Like there's actually a lot of venomous snakes. And not having them in the courtyard with kids was pretty vital. So, you learn that stuff. And then you can see everybody working really hard to plant all those plantings there. I tried to source as many natives as we could. We talked to this guy who is over there, and he's propagating all this native Sansevieria, but he wanted too much money for it, so we didn't buy it. But we were able to use at least one native plant and then a couple of naturalized ones. We have regional native plants, but we actually have like a fishtail palm, which is endemic to the East Africa region. And I was like, yes, we got one native in there. So through a lot of concerted effort, it came together, right?
Beautiful.
Isn't that cool? Hey, Mike, come on, that was nice. And now I did have to pay him a little bit of money for him to do that, but yeah. Hold your applause till the end. Hang on. Right? So here it is. The wood was incredibly hard. It's eucalyptus, so it'll last forever. But we had to pre-drill all of our screw holes, people. I'll talk about some of the challenges of working there. It was so hard, right? But then we had the experts come back out, and these kids, they loved it. It was awesome. And then we got to hang out with them and just see them enjoying a space that we got to be a part of, which is pretty amazing. You'll see I blurred out the kids' faces on purpose because I don't really need, we want to have their own privacy. This isn't just some orphan tourism thing. I've read a lot of books about crap like that. But anyway, so here they are actually using the space, right? These guys do these super cool choreographed dances, and like they have such a good time, and all the UGA students got to connect with them, and it was beautiful. So it's a central courtyard. It provides not only like a space to do these dances, but places for eating outside because there are dining rooms right there. Also, just a place to relax and not play football, right? But the kids loved it. I mean, I like, this is one of my favorite pictures. Like right when we got here, these kids are just flipping and enjoying it. It was beautiful. So okay, that's kind of that's the main thing. I'm going to land the plane with key takeaways, right? What did we learn from this, or what came up while we were trying to do all this stuff? One of those was this hide and read, climb and seek. Remember how when we did the workshop and they were like climbing and hiding is one of the things that we heard from the kids. So we had the administration over here saying, hey, we don't want a play structure in here, right? And then we got the kids over here saying we want to hide and climb. So we snuck the hiding spaces in, and we called them reading nooks. Leoba, I'm sorry, that's what we did. She knew it. She knew what was happening, right? So these are reading nooks. But check this out. Okay, they're also like particularly poignant because kiddos in institutional care like this, you don't have a lot of personal space, right? So you can actually like hide in these little things, and the kids just gravitate for it. They're like automatically playing hide and seek. It's like a universal game, But they're automatically like jumping in there and like hiding and playing, and yes, like maybe they could be playing, but they could also just be small spaces that they could get in and feel a little bit of their own personal space. So that was cool. I mentioned this a little bit. So OCAT, like kiddo empowerment, like empowering the kids at OCAT. Like some of the goal of this was to actually give them agency and impact on their own environment, right? I mentioned this earlier, but like kids in institutional care and poverty have very limited agency and choices, right? So if they could actually, the goal there was to say, hey, you could actually have influence on this, that might be empowering for them, right? That they might say, you know what, I was able to have a part in this. So I don't have great metrics on that, but they seem to we at least tried to connect and show them that when they told us that they liked these things, that we incorporated them and that they showed up. Right? Okay, let's talk about some of the challenges, right? There's a lot of really cool things that we experienced, but there are a ton of challenges too. But that's half of the point. That's half the reason I love going to the majority world. Because it's the majority world. Like an old statistic from like 2020, it's changed a little bit, was 3 billion people live on less than $3 a day, okay? So that statistic has changed a little bit because extreme material poverty is decreasing. I was going to give you a big graph, but just trust me that like there's a majority of the world lives on very little, right? So some of the things that we ran into that was like you kind of have to deal with. Yeah, I mean, great challenges equal great opportunities, right? Electrical power was inadequate. It would turn on and off. Then they had to get a generator, but the generator hadn't been run in a year, so they had to pull their motorbike around and jump it off with a motorbike. That didn't work. So then you can see my student here actually like wrapping some of our line around it and pulling that thing to get it started, right? I wish I should have put that video in here because we were all like, yeah, like right? Cross-cultural confusion, right? Like I mentioned, my Swahili is terrible, right? And their English was better than my Swahili for sure, but it's hard to convey design intent across cultures, Wood was so hard, I mentioned this, that we had to pre-drill. So like when you look at the amount of work that we were able to accomplish, the amount of work that the contractor did, we were like, well, we had a part in that. It was so hard, like literally like we were there and we were just pre-drilling our holes. And of course, they didn't have power. So we had to plug in the drill and then drill. And then we had to come back and then we had to screw. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. Limited funds, right? We actually had to fundraise during the Maymester. It was pretty awesome. I was like, guys, if you want to put plants in, because we had money but this always happens on built projects. It happens even more like when I'm not on the ground and I don't know the cost of material and we're trying to sort it all out. So it's like, we were actually able to like put up a GoFundMe and then people jumped in and were able to fund more of it. So, this is what I love about this and what I think is so fascinating about living in challenging places like this. When I lived in Uganda, I would occasionally accomplish something and I would be like, I have landed on the moon, like my computer broke one time and I was able to get it fixed and I felt like I had done everything, Because creative problem solving in situ in these really hard places is, oh man, if you can solve things and build in some of these hard places, you are going to be empowered to do any sort of office work, right? So, and so impacts on our students too, right? Like, yes, maybe we impact what we're doing there, but I definitely know, at least from what I've heard from people and what I've experienced, that this is incredibly impactful stuff. I want to read you this real quick. This is from one of the students who came on the 2024 Maymester. Working directly with the founder of OCAT Orphanage and the staff taught me the value of clear client communication and reinforced how meaningful design can positively impact the people who use a space. The design workshop with the children showed me the incredible joy that even a simple design can bring to a community. Studying abroad in Tanzania was truly the most rewarding experience. I didn't even have to pay her to say that. Like, she actually evidently felt that. Next one, right? This is from this past year. I'd say that this experience was completely eye-opening. Watching the kids play on and interact with a space that I helped transform really deepened my passion for the field. Seeing firsthand the real impact that our work can have on communities made me even more excited to keep designing spaces that matter to people. That's a good one, right? Spaces that matter to people. I love that. So, somewhat kind of, big broad brush conclusions, or this is where I got out of it. East Africa and majority world settings, are rich in challenges, but they're rich in opportunities, right? Like, I love when I get to teach early designers and I'm like, as many curveballs as I can throw at them. They hate it, but it's really good, Like, I do this prototyping thing where they have to build a tower, but then I keep throwing changes at them the whole time. Like, this is the day one. Because learning I don't want you to just think through and be able to problem solve one way. I want you to know the ability of creative problem solving. So whatever environment you're in, you're able to apply that, right? Because we as designers aren't just landscapers. Don't let them tell you that, right? We are world shapers. We do a lot of stuff. So in these tough environments, right? You can really teach creative thinking. You have a really strong opportunity to teach these things. It's impactful for those we're serving, but it's also super, super impactful for the kids who go on the trip, And then there's last one is, there's more to learn. We need more data, so we need to continue this sort of work. And with that, I will end. If you want to scan these, you can get involved. There you go. Thanks.